Good morning. Welcome to How Are We Here? My little series where I take a look at how older cultures and its people thought we got here. This week, let's see how the Aztecs of old thought we got here. So, we are going to dive in to the legend of the fifth sun. This creation myth from the Aztec has several different versions, because of course it does. A few reasons why, as with many of the other tales I have told, these were originally passed down through oral traditions. Another reason is the Aztecs, they adopted, modified their gods and their myths from other groups of people that they had met and sometimes they had conquered. Finally, time. Time changes and influences many of these tales, a game of telephone throughout the ages. So, this creation tale says the world of the Aztecs were in the fifth cycle of creation and destruction at the time of the Spanish colonization. Four times the world had been created and destroyed, which I do love the cyclical creation tales, just something about the process of birth, death, and repeat. So let's take a small dive into the different gods who governed the earth, the different elements that were important to those eras and their destruction. Eras, these worlds were called suns in the old tales. So lean back, relax, and let me take you on a journey. In the beginning, according to legend, the first god, Ometeotl, the god of duality, created themselves from the void. They were both male and female, sometimes known as two gods, the Lord of Duality, Ometeotl, and the Lady of Duality, Ometeotl. They gave birth to four gods, the Tezcatlipocas of the east, north, south, and west. Now, Tezcatlipoca is the name of one deity, but also encompasses three other deities known as the black, white, blue, and red Tezcatlipocas. So let's cover these dudes really quickly. Each represented a cardinal direction. So the first one, Tezcatlipoca, ruler of the north, is the black Tezcatlipoca. He is known as the smoking mirror. He was god of darkness, lord of the night, and god of providence. We'll also find out a little bit later on, he's kind of a trickster god. Right. The next, Xipe Totec, ruler of the east, is the red Tezcatlipoca, known as our Lord, the Flayed One. He is the god of force and agriculture, lord of crafts, and lord of the seasons and regeneration. Quetzalcoatl, ruler of the west, is the feathered serpent, god of light, and wisdom. He is lord of the day and the winds. The next is Huitzilopochtli, ruler of the south. He was called the left-handed hummingbird, god of war and will, lord of the sun and fire. I forgot to say it, but these two, Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli, they were the blue and red Tezcatlipocas. These four gods, they were gifted with the ability to create life without having to give birth by their parent or parents, depending on how you believe that original creator god was. After 600 years of this beginning, the suns began to create the universe in cosmic time, which we will call a sun. Throughout this, the gods would create the world and the other deities. They created the universe at Teotihuacan. Some translations call this the birthplace of the gods or where the gods were born. After the world was created, the gods would give light to humans. But in order to do this, one of the gods, they would have to make a sacrifice. This sacrifice would be leaping into a fire. So then each subsequent sun would be created by a personal sacrifice of one of the gods. The Aztecs and their gods felt that sacrifice is required to begin that phase of renewal. In the first sun, or the first era, throughout this period, the four gods, they would attempt to create something. But when they did create something, it would fall into the water beneath. And when what they created fell into that water, it would be eaten by Quetzalcoatl, the giant earth crocodile who swam throughout the water with mouths at all of its joints, probably devouring the failed creations. It was here the gods realized a sacrifice needed to be made, for to create something, something must be destroyed. So the black Tezcatlipoca, also known just as Tezcatlipoca, god of the night, would be the first god to make the sacrifice. He would leap into the fire, starting the very first sun, which for some reason is called for tiger. I don't know why, that's just what one website said. He would only become half a sun, though, because legends say he was missing a leg and this made him not as powerful. Or it could be because he was god of the night. Anywho, during this era, they would make more gods, the most important being the water gods. Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility, and forgive me for this one, Chalchiaticue was also goddess of lakes, rivers, oceans, and beauty. The earth was inhabited by giant humans. These giants, they lived off of acorns. But eventually the giants were consumed by jaguars. Those, little feline monsters or creatures or whatnot. This was on the direction of Tezcatlipoca, commanded it after Quetzalcoatl, in his jealousy, knocked him from the sky with a great stone club and removed the sun from the sky. And you thought your sibling rivalries were bad. So this time of the giants, it only lasted 676 years, or in the Aztec calendar, 13 cycles of 52 years each cycle. All right, in the second sun, the second era, the white Tezcatlipoca, also known as Quetzalcoatl, would make the sacrifice by fire and he would start the second sun, called Four Wind. In this era, the earth was populated by humans of normal stature. They only consumed pinon nuts. These humans would eventually drift from the teachings of the gods, drift from the beliefs of the gods. They embraced greed and corruption. So here we get some jealousy. Tezcatlipoca, he wanted to be a sun as well, like last time. He was also the god of magic and justice and didn't like the lack of balance these people had. So he turned himself into a tiger and overthrew Quetzalcoatl. This era would eventually end when a massive hurricane and catastrophic floods ravaged the world. Quetzalcoatl, though, he held these flawed humans in high regard. So, the few survivors managed to make it to the tops of trees, and he transformed them into monkeys. This era, this sun, with the U, also lasted 676 years. Now, we find ourselves in the third sun, or the third era. So I was under the impression that it was the Tezcatlipocas that sacrificed themselves. But here it seems Tlaloc, the rain god, he was crowned as this sun's ruling deity. So we will call this sun the four-rain sun. Tezcatlipoca, though, being a mischievous god, a trickster, deceived him and snatched away the love of his life. Xochitl. She was deity of flower, corn, and beauty. Now, flower as in flowers that you smell or flour that you use in baking, not quite sure. The people of this time, they ate seeds and they grew in the water. So when Tlaloc was consumed by his own grief and could no longer fulfill his duty as the sun, a great drought fell upon the people. They prayed for rain, they prayed for mercy, they prayed for salvation. But their prayers, they fell upon deaf ears. This world, it would eventually end when it rained fire and ashes. Some tales say Tlaloc unleashed this destruction, wanting nothing but ashes to be left, probably to match how he felt with the loss of his lover. Some say Quetzalcoatl, he made it rain fire and ashes, because, gods are jerks sometimes. It makes more sense to me that the other guy did it. There were survivors of this era. They would become turkeys, butterflies, and dogs. This world only lasted 364 years. 7 of their 52-year cycles. Our fourth sun, the four-water sun, would have been governed by Tezcatlipoca. Sorry for the name, I'll put the writing on there. She was the sister and the wife of Tlaloc, goddess of waters, rivers, seas, baptisms, and fertility. Her second wife, it seems. I guess Tlaloc had a type. God sure do like to marry their siblings a lot. See other videos in the series. She was a very loving god, though, towards her people, though, and they survived off of maize. But Tezcatlipoca was not a nice guy. He really comes off as a bit of a dick in this story. He judged the water goddess selfish, that she faked her kindness to gain the people's praise, that she didn't really love them, that she only loved the attention. Xipe was hurt by these words, crushed by him, and she cried blood for the next 52 years, a whole cycle. The world would end in a great flood. Because what would a creation tale be without a flood? When this flood ended, the world, all the people who managed to survive in it, they did so by becoming fish. This world lasted 676 years, much like the first and second suns. Alright, the fifth sun, our current sun, our current era. Quetzalcoatl was a big old softy, so not being able to accept the destruction of his people, he went down to the underworld and stole all of their bones from Mictlantecuhtli, god of the dead. Who else would be ruling over the underworld but god of the dead? Quetzalcoatl dipped the bones in his own blood. He did this to resurrect them. When they opened their eyes, they saw a sky illuminated by the current sun. The blue Tezcatlipoca. Alright, this one's okay, so here we go. This current sun, the blue Tezcatlipoca, was Huitzilopochtli. Alright, I will put the writing up on the screen. So someone gets jealous of their brighter, more important brother. And these were the stars of the south. We get a very long name. Oh, good lord. Kentozuthutanua. They were a group of gods, like I said, translation, the stars of the south. Some tales saying up to 400 gods. But they were led by one goddess, Koyokitsuki, goddess of the moon. An assault on the sun was fought every night by the moon and her comrades. They would bring the group close to victory every evening, but every morning the sun, Huitzilopochtli, who rules the day, would fight them back. This is another reason why sacrifices were made. The Aztecs would lend their aid in this all-important war by offering the sun nourishing sacrifices of humans, blood sacrifices. They would also offer sacrifices to Tezcatlipoca in fear of his judgment because of the few gods we have talked about. This one seems to be a big old butt face. Quetzalcoatl, though, he seems a pretty stand-up guy because he opposes the human sacrifices. After all, he sacrificed his own blood to bring these guys back from the underworld. He would receive offers of the people sacrificing their own blood. It was important that these sacrifices were made to them and the other gods. There is a fear that if the gods became displeased, or a group of gods led by the goddess of the moon were to win, well, you can guess what would happen. The sun, it would go black. The world, it would be shattered in an earthquake. And Tezcatlipocas, a celestial deity, a leader of a group of celestial deities by the same name, she wore skulls upon her skeletal frame, and she would slay Huitzilopochtli, and then they all would slay humanity as well. Some say, though, the fifth sun, it started a little bit different. At the end of the previous sun, the previous era, when the world was barren and naught but ashes, the gods, they gathered in the darkness at Teotihuacan, that ancient city of importance to Aztecs. It is known today because of the Pyramid of the Sun. Lots of rites and practices were have said to have been done here. So here are the gods. They had to decide who would sacrifice themselves this time to start the next world. Huhutuata, the old fire god, would start the bonfire for the sacrifice, but none of the important gods wanted to leap into the flames. But there were two volunteers. Tezcatlipocas, son of Tlaloc and his wife, also known as Lord of the Snails. He was a rich and proud god. And as the sacrificial fire burned, he hesitated. He was not brave enough to stand in the face of the heat of the flames. During this hesitation, Nanuhutsen, a poor and humble god whose name meant full of sores, was prepared to leap into the fire. Being an older god, the other gods did not think he would make a good son. He would become the new son. Tezcatlipoca followed Nanuhutsen by leaping into the fire as well. He would become a second son. But the other gods realized something. Two sons would overwhelm the world. To combat this, they threw a rabbit at him, and he became the moon instead. The Aztecs believe this is why you can still see the rabbit in the moon to this day. I don't know about you, but do any of you see a rabbit in the moon? I'll have to take a look next time I'm outside at nighttime. The two celestial bodies, they would be set in motion by the god of the wind, Xipe. He violently and fiercely blew at the sun till it began to move. So in our present era, we find ourselves in what they call the four-movement sun. We are ruled by Tonotia, the sun god. We also have a day sign, Olin, meaning movement, symbolizes this era. He bridges the gap between Nanuhutsen and Huitzilopochtli, the two gods that became the sun in the previous two segments I talked about. He was a sick god, but he rejuvenated himself when he burned himself alone. He is a warrior sun, and he wanders the heavens with the souls of those who fell and died during battle. He will not move if he has not offered enough sacrifices. And so, according to the Aztec beliefs, this world, our current world, will end in earthquakes. Also, great sky monsters would come down and eat all the humans. I'm assuming that's a takeoff of the previous segment. Aztec, who consider themselves to be people of the sun, took it upon themselves to nourish the sun god. They did it through blood offerings and sacrifices. They did this because they believed that they failed to, the world would end, and the sun, it would disappear from the sky. Alright, so I talked a bit about the 52-year cycle in the old Aztec calendar. And when these cycles closed out, the priests would carry out the new fire ceremony. This is known as binding of the years. The legend of the five suns predicts the end of the calendar cycle, but it was unknown which cycle is going to be the last one. So people would clean their homes, discard old household items, discard household idols, get rid of cooking pots, clothing, and the whatnot. It sounds like they would do this in a big bonfire, and during the last 5 days of the ceremony, the Aztec people, or at least the priest, or no, all the Aztec people would go up on their roofs and await the fate of the world. Because finally, on the last day of the calendar cycle, the priests, they would climb up the Star Mountain and watch the rise of the Pleiades, a star cluster also known as the Seven Sisters. They wanted to make sure it was following its normal path. A fire drill, I think that the website's meant some kind of spike or something. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's not what we used to do in school or work, so we know where to go in case of a fire. That spike would be driven through the heart of a sacrificial victim. Myth says if the fire couldn't be lit, the sun would be destroyed forever. A successful fire would be brought unto Tenochtitlan, that very important city we discussed earlier, and it would be used to relight hearths throughout the city. Some chronicles say the ceremony was done every 52 years throughout the Aztec world in different villages and cities. Alrighty, so here we are. One little story, a little history courtesy of the interwebs. As I have said before, in this video, and my previous ones. Different versions exist, so forgive me if I wasn't able to splice them together very well, or if I didn't cover one that you're familiar with. The two main cultures this story was attributed to are the Aztecs and the Nuhua. I will spell that out too because I'm sure I did not pronounce that right. Their theologies were combined sometime before the Spaniards conquered these people. But we did get a fun little story. It reminds me of the Hindu video I did a few weeks back with the destruction and rebirth of the world thanks to Lord Shiva. It reminds me a little bit too of the Norse legend of Ragnarok as well. See that video on the channel if you haven't. Yeah, I know. Shameless self plug, trying to get more views, likes, and watch hours. But just go ahead and subscribe, it'll make things easier. I don't have much more, just that I thought the cyclical nature or narrative behind the story was very cool. I really like that theme that I have found in these old creation stories. Oh, and Quetzalcoatl, he seems to be the best god in this bunch for some reason. I think the couple times he was a douche, that could be contributed to other gods trying to tarnish his reputation. Plus, he's a feathered serpent. Very cool. Very, very dragon like. Hey there. Just a minute or two left, so please watch all the way through. It helps with the watch time and the algorithm. To start with, thanks for watching. It means a great deal to me. Secondly, I apologize for butchering any and all pronunciations. I tried. I really, really did. I'm relatively new to the whole YouTubes, so I have to ask you to give the video a like. If anything, it lets other people who may come across it know it's worth a view. As always, let me know what you thought in the comments. Engagement might help the video appear in other people's feeds. Share the video, whether in person or on your social media. Every little bit can help. And finally, maybe the most important thing to do, subscribe. If the notifications are on, you will see when I do my weekly upload, and you'll see any shorts I do, they'll show up for you easier. Both are needed for this channel to create even a small base of a few thousand subscribers. I'll admit, that seems like a pipe dream right now, but I'm giving the whole YouTube thing a shot, and your help is a huge part in that. And another thank you to wrap up my requests, no matter what you decide to do. If you are hearing me, I appreciate the view. And finally, if you enjoyed hearing this old Aztec tale of creation, maybe, just maybe, you're like hearing other creation stories. I do have a few other tales of how other cultures thought we got here on the channel. You should see last week's video over there, and I'll pop the How Are We Here playlist over here. Take a view, TLDR, I'm just some guy on the YouTube who did some reading on an interesting topic and shared it the best I could. Thank you all again. Have a day, subscribe, and take care. Keep safe.